The layoff list was not made the morning they called you into the room. It was not made the week before. It was built months earlier, assembled in stages, filtered through criteria you were never shown, reviewed by legal, approved in batches, and finalized while you were still sending status updates and planning next quarter's projects as if everything was normal. By the time the email arrived, your name had already passed through more institutional checkpoints than your last promotion application. This video is about the 5 specific factors that actually determine whose name ends up on that list. And the last one is the factor that most employees assume protects them but almost never does. Here is how the layoff list actually gets built, because the process is nothing like what most employees imagine. Most people assume the list is made by comparing performance reviews and cutting from the bottom. That is almost never how it works. The list starts with a financial target, a specific dollar amount that leadership needs to remove from the payroll budget. That target gets distributed across departments based on headcount ratios and cost allocation. Each department head receives a number, not a list of names, a dollar amount, and they work backward from that number to identify which combination of salaries adds up to the target with the least operational disruption. The list is assembled from dollars, not from performance scores. Performance enters the conversation only as a tiebreaker when 2 employees cost similar amounts and only one needs to go. The primary filter is always financial, and the 5 factors that determine the financial calculation are the 5 factors that determine whether your name is on the list. Counting down from 5. Factor number 5, your salary relative to your level. When a department head is working backward from a dollar target, the first thing they look at is who costs the most relative to the value the institution believes they provide. This is not the same as who earns the most. It is who earns the most relative to their level, because a senior director who costs $200,000 but generates significant strategic value is expensive but justified, while a mid-level employee who costs $120,000 because of tenure-based raises but is doing work that a new hire could do for $80,000 is expensive and exposed. The exposed employee is not being punished for earning too much. They are being identified as a position where the company can hit its target number most efficiently by replacing high tenure costs with market rate costs. This looks like the moment you realize that the new hire doing a similar role was being paid 20% less than you, and that the difference was not a reflection of your superior value but a target on your position that the institution calls a cost optimization opportunity. The takeaway: in a layoff, your salary is not what you earn, it is what you cost, and cost is always the first filter. Factor number 4, how many people can do your job. When the department head is building the list, the second filter after cost is replaceability, and replaceability is not about your skill level. It is about supply. If your role requires a skill set that is common in the market, the company can replace you at market rate relatively quickly, and the operational disruption is short. If your role requires institutional knowledge, client relationships, or technical expertise that takes months to rebuild, replacing you is expensive and risky, and the department head will look for someone else to hit their number. The question is never how good are you at your job, the question is how hard would it be to find someone who could do it adequately within 90 days. This looks like the realization that your job title matches 300 open listings on every job board, which means the market is full of people who can do what you do at the price the company wants to pay. The takeaway: replaceability is not about your skill, it is about how many other people have that skill at the price the company is willing to pay in your market. Performance reviews do not decide the list, cost calculations do. Factor number 3, whether your manager fought for you. The layoff list does not go directly from the department head to legal review. There is a negotiation phase, a period where each manager is given the preliminary list of names from their team and asked to confirm or contest. This is the moment where your relationship with your manager determines everything, because contesting a name on the list costs the manager political capital. They have to argue that losing you specifically would create more disruption than the financial saving justifies, and they have to make that argument to their own manager, who is under pressure to hit the target number and does not want to hear that the list needs to be revised. If your manager fights for you, spends their political capital, makes the case, takes the risk of pushing back on their own manager, your name comes off the list. If your manager does not fight, if the political cost feels too high, or if the relationship is not strong enough to motivate the expenditure, your name stays. Here is what determines whether your manager fights for you or lets your name pass through without resistance. It is not your performance score. It is the quality of the professional relationship you built with them over the preceding months and years, and the trust capital, the institutional goodwill, the advocacy investment that we have covered across multiple videos on this channel. Your manager fights for the people they are genuinely invested in. They let the names pass for the people they manage but do not champion. The difference between those two categories is not about how hard you work, it is about how much your manager personally values your presence on their team. Factor number two, how visible you were to leadership. And when the list reaches the level above your manager for final approval, the person reviewing it has one question about every name they do not recognize. Who is this and what do they do? If the senior leader cannot recall your name, your work, or your contribution to any outcome they personally value, your name is easy to approve on the list because approving it costs them nothing emotionally or politically. They are not cutting someone they know. They are cutting a line item they have never interacted with. The employees who survive layoffs at the highest rate are not the best performers. They are the employees whose names are recognized by people 2 levels above them as contributors to outcomes that matter. When a senior leader sees a name they recognize and associate with positive results, removing that name feels risky. Keeping it feels safe. That feeling is the difference between staying and going. This looks like the name on the list that the senior vice president paused on because they remembered the presentation from last quarter, and the name beside it that passed through without a second of hesitation because nobody above the manager's level had ever heard it. The takeaway, the people leadership cannot name do not get defended. Visibility at the level where the list gets approved is the difference between being a person and being a cost. But none of these factors compare to factor number one, and this is the one that most employees assume is protecting them when it almost never is. The people who survive layoffs are not the best performers. They are the most expensive to lose. Factor number one, whether losing you hurts their numbers. Most employees believe that doing excellent work protects them from layoffs, and that belief is wrong, and it is wrong for a very specific structural reason. Excellent work protects you from a performance-based termination. Layoffs are not performance-based terminations. They are financial restructuring events, and the criteria that govern them are fundamentally different from the criteria that govern performance management. The factor that actually determines whether you survive a layoff is not how well you do your job. It is what happens to the team's measurable output if you are removed. If your departure would cause a measurable drop in a metric that the department head has to report upward, revenue, client retention, output volume, compliance adherence, anything with a number attached, removing you creates a problem that the manager has to solve while simultaneously hitting every other target they are being held to. That problem makes your name expensive to cut. Expensive names get moved to the bottom of the list. If your departure would not cause a measurable drop in anything that gets reported upward. If your work is excellent but not tied to a trackable metric that someone above your manager watches, removing you creates zero institutional friction. Your name passes through the list without resistance because nobody's numbers change when you leave. This looks like the realization that you have been doing excellent work for 3 years that has never been attached to a metric anyone above your manager tracks, while the colleague who survived every layoff has always been connected to a revenue line or a client account that shows up in the quarterly report. The takeaway, the institution does not measure your value by what you do. It measures your value by what breaks when you leave. If nothing measurable breaks, your name is easy to approve. Here is the honest closing. The layoff list was never about who deserved to stay. It was about cost, replaceability, advocacy, visibility, and measurable impact. 5 factors that operate entirely independently of how hard you work, how much you care, and how consistently you deliver excellent results. That is not fair. But fair is not the system you are operating in, and pretending that it is will not protect you from the system that actually exists. But now you know the real criteria, and knowing the criteria changes what you optimize for. Attach your work to measurable outcomes that get reported above your manager. Build the relationships that make your manager willing to fight for your name. Develop expertise that is not easily replaceable at your market rate. Make sure leadership above your manager knows your name and associates it with results they care about. And understand your salary relative to what the market would charge for someone doing your job, because that gap is the first number the department head looks at when the target arrives. Across this 4-video series, you have learned the organizational signs that layoffs are coming, the personal signs that you are on the list, the moves to make in the preparation window, and now the 5 factors that actually determine whose name ends up on the list in the first place. That information does not make layoffs fair. It makes them survivable, because you are no longer operating on the assumption that doing good work is enough to protect you. It is not. It never was. Now that you understand how the system actually decides who stays and who goes, the next video goes back to something you can control right now, while your boss keeps rewarding your hard work with more hard work instead of a raise, and exactly what to do about it. The list was built on cost, not on merit. Now you know what actually keeps you off it.